Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pure AI podcast, where flesh and blood journalists do the legwork and AI swoops in for the last mile audio conversion. I'm John K. Waters, editor in chief in the Converge 360 group of 1105 Media. And I'm joined, as always, by our editorial director, Gladys Rama. Hi, Gladys. Hi.
Hi, John. I've been looking forward to talking with you about a story you wrote for our online publication about OpenAI's acquisition of I/O, the hardware startup founded by Jony Ive, formerly of Apple, and several other ex-Apple employees.
This is a $6.5 billion all-stock deal that brings a team of approximately 55 hardware engineers, software developers, and manufacturing specialists to the company that created ChatGPT. That I/O team includes several high-profile former Apple employees who played key roles in designing the company's landmark products, and it's OpenAI's largest acquisition to date.
I'm not really familiar with Ive's company. What do they do exactly?
I/O is an AI device startup founded to create a new generation of AI devices. The company has been quietly working on hardware for 2 years. OpenAI actually acquired a 23% stake in I/O through a partnership formed in late 2024, and Ive has been collaborating closely with Altman. Specifically, I/O focuses on developing AI-powered consumer hardware, things like a screenless phone and smart home gadgets, with the goal of fundamentally changing how people use and interact with AI technology.
I'm curious about the other investors in I/O. Who else is going to benefit from this massive deal?
So there were several major investors besides OpenAI. Emerson Collective was in there, Sutter Hill Ventures, Thrive Capital, Maverick Ventures, and SV Angel. And it's worth noting that OpenAI made it really clear that Altman personally holds no equity in IO. They're being very transparent about that to avoid any perception of conflict of interest.
When is all of this supposed to actually happen? These big acquisitions usually take time, right?
They're expecting to close the deal this summer, but of course that's subject to getting regulatory approval. In the current climate, especially with AI companies facing more scrutiny, that's not necessarily a given. But assuming it goes through, this acquisition represents a major strategic shift for OpenAI.
In what way? How does this change their overall strategy?
Well, it signals that OpenAI is no longer content to just be a software and services company. They want to create their own ecosystem of AI powered devices. Think about it. Until now, OpenAI has been dependent on other companies' hardware to deliver their AI. But with this acquisition, they're positioning themselves to potentially compete with companies like Apple and Google by creating their own hardware optimized specifically for their AI models. It's a vertical integration play that could give them much more control over the entire user experience.
So, tell me more about this I/O team. Who exactly is joining OpenAI through this acquisition?
It's a relatively small group, as I said, about 55 people total. But what makes them special is the concentration of talent.
And their former Apple employees? Why is that significant?
These aren't just any Apple employees. These are people who work directly with Ive on some of Apple's iconic products. We're talking about the designers and engineers behind the iPhone, the iPad, the MacBook, products that literally changed how we interact with technology. These are the people who know how to create devices that people actually want to use. You know what I mean?
Sure, but I'm curious about what kind of expertise they bring specifically. Is it more about the hardware design or the overall product vision?
It's really both. See, what makes this team so valuable is that they understand the entire product development cycle, from initial concept sketches all the way through to mass manufacturing. These people know how to take an idea and turn it into millions of perfectly crafted devices. And and they bring this Apple-like attention to detail, where every millimeter, every material choice, every interaction is carefully considered.
So this isn't just about making something that looks good, it's about the whole experience.
Exactly. The I/O team understands that great products come from the perfect marriage of hardware and software. At Apple, they learned how to create these seamless experiences where the technology almost disappears, right? And that approach is potentially revolutionary when applied to AI devices. Because right now, most AI interactions feel very technical, very computer like. This team could change that.
What about the manufacturing side? That's always been a challenge for new hardware companies, hasn't it?
Look, designing beautiful prototypes is one thing, but scaling up to produce millions of units with consistent quality, that's where so many hardware startups fail. But the IO team includes manufacturing specialists who know how to work with suppliers, how to design for manufacturability, how to set up quality control processes. This is expertise that took Apple decades to build, and now OpenAI is essentially acquiring it overnight. Ive is really the connective tissue here. He built Apple's design team, established their approach, and he brought many of those same people to I/O. His influence on consumer technology is hard to overstate. The man basically defined what modern consumer electronics look and feel like. And now he's going to be applying that vision to AI devices. It's potentially a huge shift in how we'll interact with AI in our daily lives.
Say more about how this all started. What do we know about the history of this collaboration?
According to the announcement, this whole thing began about 2 years ago. Ive and his creative collective, called Love From, started collaborating quietly, and I mean very quietly, the OpenAI team. And what's fascinating is that it didn't start as this big business deal, you know? It began much more organically.
What do you mean by organically? Was it like a friendship first or something?
Exactly that. The announcement literally describes it as a collaboration built upon friendship, curiosity, and shared values. And I think that's really important to understand. This wasn't just some corporate strategy play from the beginning. It was these two visionaries, Ive and Altman, who just started bouncing ideas off each other because they were genuinely interested in the same problems.
And then how did it evolve from those initial conversations into this massive acquisition?
So, what happened was these tentative ideas and explorations, as they called them, started to grow into something much more concrete. They were developing actual designs, actual concepts that got them both really excited. And and as that happened, the ambition level just kept growing. At some point, they must have realized they needed to formalize this relationship to really make it work.
Were there other investors involved in IO before this acquisition?
IO had backing from some significant investors. We're talking about Emerson Collective, Sutter Hill Ventures, Thrive Capital, Maverick Ventures, SV Angel. These are serious players. And that early investment round probably helped establish that 6.5 billion valuation we're seeing now.
Is Sam Altman personally invested in IO? That would seem like a potential conflict of interest, wouldn't it?
OpenAI clearly anticipated it because they specifically addressed this in their announcement. They stated very clearly that Altman holds no equity in IO. So while he was collaborating with Ive and the team, he wasn't personally invested in the company that OpenAI is now acquiring. That's an important distinction for transparency purposes.
So now that IO is being acquired by OpenAI, I'm curious about how they're going to like structure everything. Do we know anything about how the new division will be organized?
Yeah, so there's actually some pretty clear information about that. After the acquisition closes, which should happen this summer, assuming they get all the regulatory approvals, IO is going to continue operating from their San Francisco headquarters. They're not dismantling anything or moving people around unnecessarily.
That makes sense. Keeping some continuity must be important when you're bringing in such specialized talent.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is how they're handling the leadership structure. So, the new hardware division, this whole effort to create AI powered consumer devices, is going to be led by Peter Wallinder, who's currently OpenAI's Vice President of Product. He's going to oversee the development of this entire new hardware lineup they're planning.
Tell me a bit more about Peter Wallinder. Is he someone with hardware experience already?
So Peter's background is it's actually more on the AI and product side than pure hardware. He's been with OpenAI for a while now, and he's been instrumental in their product strategy. But, and this is why the acquisition makes so much sense, he'll be working closely with all those hardware specialists coming over from IO. So you've got OpenAI's AI expertise and product vision paired with IO's hardware capabilities.
So it sounds like they're creating this sort of hybrid team structure where the IO people maintain their identity, but are integrated into OpenAI's broader vision.
The announcement specifically mentions that IO will collaborate closely with OpenAI's existing product teams. So it's not like they're just going to be off doing their own thing. There's going to be this tight integration between the AI capabilities that OpenAI is known for and the hardware expertise that IO brings to the table.
And what about Jony Ive himself? What role will he play in this new structure?
Ive isn't actually becoming an OpenAI employee in the traditional sense. His design firm, Love From, will remain an independent entity, but it will assume responsibility for the design of OpenAI's software and hardware products. So Ive and his team will be deeply involved in shaping everything about these new devices, from the physical form to the user interface.
Does this structure remind you at all of how Apple operated with Ive when he was there?
You know, there are definitely some parallels. At Apple, I've had this almost untouchable status and tremendous autonomy. He reported directly to the CEO, bypassing all the normal corporate structures. And it looks like they're creating something similar here, giving him a special role that acknowledges his unique talents and vision.
Do you think there's something about AI specifically that's drawing him to this project? Like, does he see AI as the next frontier in design?
You know, I think that's exactly it. If you think about Ives' career, he's always been interested in how technology and humanity intersect. And AI represents maybe the most profound intersection we've seen yet. It's not just about creating beautiful objects anymore. It's about creating objects that can think, that can understand us, that can anticipate our needs. It's design that encompasses not just form and function, but actual intelligence and personality.
So let's talk about the actual products we might see from this partnership.
The initial output of their collaboration is projected for release in 2026, which gives them like a solid runway of development time. And that makes sense given the ambition here. They're not just slapping ChatGPT onto a smartphone.
Do we have any actual details about what these products might look like?
In a word, no. They're being incredibly tight-lipped about the specific product details. But there are some interesting clues in the information that's been released. The key phrase that jumped out at me was that they're focusing on novel computing form factors optimized for AI first interaction. And they specifically mentioned that these would be distinct from traditional smartphones or laptops.
So, what do you think that means? Like, are we talking about wearables or something completely different?
I think it could be a whole range of things. I mean, when you think about it, our current devices, smartphones, tablets, laptops, they were all designed around a pre AI paradigm, right? They're built for typing, tapping, swiping, but AI opens up different interaction possibilities. So we might be looking at devices that are much more um, ambient and environmental. Maybe something that's always present, but not necessarily something you hold or type on.
So, maybe more like voice controlled devices or things that blend into your home?
Exactly. But I think they'll go way beyond what we've seen with current smart speakers and home assistants. I'm thinking about, you know, devices that might have more sophisticated sensors to understand context, maybe even emotional states. And with Ives' design sensibility, they'll probably be beautiful objects in their own right, things you actually want in your space.
Do you think they might be looking at AR or VR applications? That seems to be where a lot of companies are focusing.
I think that's definitely possible. But but what's interesting is that we haven't heard any specific mention of that. And Ive has always been someone who's focused on making technology that fits naturally into people's lives. So if they do go the AR route, I'd expect something much more elegant and less intrusive than what we've seen so far in the market.
What about the AI capabilities themselves? How do you think those will differ from what we see in current products?
That's where things get really exciting. By 2026, we're likely to see AI systems that are much more contextually aware and capable of nuanced understanding. And and I think that's going to enable interactions that feel much more natural and human-like.
And I imagine the physical design will be critical to making that work, right?
Oh, absolutely critical. I mean, Ive is known for his attention to materials, to tactile qualities, to how objects feel in your hand or in your space. So whatever these devices are, they're going to have that trademark thoughtfulness about physical experience. And that's going to be important for getting people comfortable with a new computing paradigm.
What about the competition? Will they be first to market with whatever this is?
That's a great question. We're already seeing companies like Meta and Humane trying to create what some analysts are calling physical AI devices. But honestly, the reception has been pretty mixed so far. What I think OpenAI and IO have going for them is this combination of cutting edge AI with world class design expertise. They're taking their time, not rushing to market, and that patience might really pay off in creating something truly groundbreaking rather than just, you know, a first attempt.
Let's talk about Lovefrom's role in all this. That's Ives' design firm, right? What happens to it now?
Love From is going to remain an independent entity, which I think is quite telling about how this partnership is structured. It's not just a complete absorption of Ive and his team. They're maintaining some separation there.
But they will be heavily involved with OpenAI's products.
Love From is going to take on responsibility for the design of both OpenAI's software and hardware products. And and this is huge because it means that Ive's design philosophy is going to permeate everything that comes out of this collaboration. It's not just about the physical devices, but also about how the AI interfaces and experiences feel to users.
What about their existing clients? Don't they work with some other big names?
So Love From will maintain its existing relationships with clients like Ferrari and Airbnb. These are prestigious design partnerships, but the announcement specifically mentioned that they won't be taking on any new large scale partnerships. So it looks like the OpenAI collaboration is going to be their main focus going forward.
Do you think we'll see an Apple like aesthetic in whatever they create for OpenAI?
I think we'll definitely see some of those principles that made Apple design iconic. You know, the attention to detail, the focus on simplicity, the seamless integration of hardware and software. But but I don't think it'll just be Apple 2.0. Ive and his team have had time to evolve their thinking since leaving Apple, and they're now applying their design philosophy to a completely different kind of technology with different requirements and possibilities.
Let's talk about Apple now. This must be a significant blow for them. Losing Ive was one thing, but now seeing him partner with OpenAI,
First of all, Apple's stock took an immediate hit when this news broke, falling by as much as 2.3% after the announcement. And and that's on top of the fact that they were already down about 17% year to date. So, investors are clearly concerned about what this means for Apple's future.
why do you think investors reacted so strongly?
Well, it's really about Apple's position in the AI race, right? They've been struggling to keep pace with competitors in artificial intelligence development. Their AI offerings they've kind of lagged behind rivals. And now you've got their former design guru, the guy who helped create their iconic products, teaming up with arguably the hottest AI company on the planet. It's it's not a great look for them.
Does Apple have anything comparable to what OpenAI is doing?
Not really, and that's part of the problem. They've made some moves in AI with things like Siri improvements and their on-device machine learning, but they haven't made the kind of bold industry shaking moves that we're seeing from companies like OpenAI or even Google and Microsoft. And now with this acquisition, well, OpenAI is essentially saying they're going to reinvent hardware for AI from the ground up.
Didn't Apple also lose a bunch of their design team members in recent years?
That's actually a critical point here. There's been this steady exodus of talent from Apple's vaunted design team. After Ive left in 2019, several other key designers followed him out the door. Some joined Love From, others went elsewhere. But the point is, that legendary Apple design team that created the iPhone, iPad, and MacBook, it's largely been dispersed.
Do you think this puts pressure on Apple to make some big AI moves of their own?
Oh, 100%. They're feeling the heat now. Look, Apple has always prided itself on controlling both hardware and software to create these seamless experiences. But now there's this third piece, AI, that's becoming equally important, and they're not leading in that space. So I think they're going to have to accelerate their AI strategy significantly. They might even need to look at some acquisitions of their own to try to catch up.
So let's pivot a bit and talk about this concept of physical AI. I'm not sure I fully understand what that means. Can you explain it?
So, physical AI is this idea of integrating artificial intelligence directly into consumer devices that can sense and respond to the real world around them. It's moving AI beyond just apps and services on your phone or computer, right? It's about creating entirely new kinds of devices that are built from the ground up with AI as their primary interface and brain. This OpenAI IO partnership is a major push into this space.
How is that different from the smart devices we already have?
That's a great question. So the difference is, well, today's smart devices, like your iPhone or even smart speakers, they were designed around traditional computing paradigms. You know, they've had AI capabilities sort of bolted on as they evolved. But what we're talking about here is completely rethinking what a device looks like when you start with AI as the foundation. It might not even have a screen, or it could have a totally different form factor that we haven't even imagined yet.
Are there other companies besides OpenAI trying to create these physical AI devices?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely competition in this space. Meta has been working on AR glasses and other wearables that incorporate AI. And then there's Humane, which actually released their AI pin last year. It's this little device you wear that has no screen, but uses AI to interact with you through voice and projections. But but the reception to these early products has been, well, pretty mixed, to be honest.
Why do you think they haven't taken off yet?
I think it's because we're still in the really early stages of figuring out what physical AI should actually be, right? Like Humane's AI pin was interesting conceptually, but in practice, it had limited functionality, battery issues, and it wasn't clear what problem it was really solving for users. The thing is, creating hardware is hard, really hard, and creating new computing paradigms is even harder. You need both breakthrough AI and exceptional hardware design to make something that's actually useful and delightful.
And that's where Jony Ive comes in?
Exactly. That's that's what makes this partnership so potentially powerful. OpenAI has the cutting-edge AI capabilities, and Ive brings this exceptional track record of creating hardware that people actually love to use. He knows how to make technology feel magical and intuitive. Remember how he once said, technology should either be beautiful or invisible. That philosophy could be exactly what physical AI needs to go from interesting concept to must have product.
So, how do you think OpenAI's approach might differ from what Meta or Humane has done?
I think OpenAI has a few advantages here. First, their AI is just, it's really good, right? ChatGPT and their other models are among the most capable available. Second, they now have this world class design team that really understands how to create products people form emotional connections with. And third, they're starting fresh. They're not trying to extend an existing product line or ecosystem. They can truly reimagine what computing looks like in an AI first world.
Do you think these physical AI devices will replace our phones or laptops?
Not immediately, no. They're looking at novel computing form factors that are distinct from traditional smartphones or laptops. So I think what we'll see first is complementary devices that do specific things really well. But long term, I mean, if this succeeds, yeah, we could eventually see a shift away from the computing paradigms we've known for decades, just like smartphones eventually replaced many functions of traditional computers for most people.
What do you think all this means for OpenAI's long term strategy? This is a pretty massive shift for them, right?
I mean, this acquisition is it's transformative for OpenAI as a company. They've been primarily a software and research organization up until now, building these incredibly powerful AI models. But with IO, they're suddenly becoming a hardware company too, and that's a completely different ball game.
Why do you think they're making this move now?
So I think there are a few really important strategic reasons behind this. First, it gives OpenAI control over the entire AI experience, from the underlying models to to the physical devices people will use to interact with them. It's similar to what Apple did with their whole vertical integration approach, you know, where they control both hardware and software.
That makes sense. Control over the entire experience.
And second, I think it's about differentiation. As more companies develop their own large language models, OpenAI needs ways to stand out. Having exclusive, beautifully designed hardware could be that differentiator. And then there's the revenue aspect. Hardware sales could provide a significant new income stream beyond their API and subscription services.
Do you think bringing in all these experienced product designers will speed up their progress toward artificial general intelligence?
That's such an interesting question. I don't think it directly accelerates their AGI research per se, but what it definitely does is provide new ways to deploy and test their AI in real world contexts. These designers bring expertise in creating interfaces that feel intuitive and natural, which could help OpenAI develop AI systems that are better at understanding human needs and intentions. So, in that sense, yeah, it could absolutely help advance their AGI goals.
I wonder if having physical devices also gives them access to different kinds of data.
That's actually a really crucial point. Physical devices can collect types of data that web based services just can't. Think about spatial awareness, environmental context, real time user behaviors. All of this could help train more sophisticated AI models. And having this data collection built into devices that people actually want to use, devices designed by someone like Jony Ive, means people might be more willing to share that data.
Do you see any risks in this strategy for OpenAI?
Definitely. Hardware is notoriously difficult, even for established companies. It's capital intensive, has complex supply chains, and if a product fails, it's much harder to pivot than with software. Look at companies like Essential or even Google with some of their hardware initiatives. Creating successful consumer devices is really challenging.
And I imagine there might be privacy concerns too.
Oh, absolutely. As these AI devices become more integrated into our daily lives, the privacy implications become much more significant. OpenAI will need to be extremely thoughtful about how they handle data collection and user privacy, especially given the scrutiny they're already under as a leading AI company. It's a delicate balance between gathering enough data to improve their AI and respecting user boundaries.
Okay, to wrap things up, what are the main takeaways we should remember from our discussion today?
I think the key points are that OpenAI is spending 6.5 billion to acquire Jony Ive's hardware startup, IO, bringing in about 55 incredibly talented people, many from Apple. And they're clearly making a big bet on creating physical AI devices that could change how we interact with artificial intelligence.
What should our listeners be watching for in the coming months?
Well, first and foremost, watch for regulatory approval. This is a big deal, and regulators are paying close attention to major AI companies right now. Then, I'd keep an eye out for any hints about product categories or design direction. Even though the first products aren't expected until 2026, we might get some teasers or leaks before then.
Do you think we'll see other AI companies following suit with hardware plays?
Oh, I think we absolutely will. I mean, we already see Meta and others experimenting in this space, but this acquisition is going to accelerate that trend. I expect we'll see more partnerships or acquisitions as AI companies try to secure hardware talent. And Apple's response will be particularly interesting to watch. They've been behind in AI, and now their former design chief is working with a competitor. They'll need to make some bold moves.
And that's it for this episode of the Pure AI podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll be back next week with another exciting topic in the world of artificial intelligence.
You can read the story online at pureai.com and follow us on X, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn to stay up to date on the latest trends shaping artificial intelligence. Bye for now.